Submission Radio here on the Submission Radio stage. That's right. UFC 205 was the Submission Radio Lounge. Now we have our own stage. How about that, John? Of course, this is John Morgan. He's done amazing work with MMA Junkie. Ken, the great outfit here all week for UFC Melbourne. As always, we love to pick your brain, and there's a lot to talk about, guys. So let's kick it off the top with Derek Brunson versus Robert Whittaker. I mean, this is a fight where a lot of people were picking Derek Brunson to come out here and disappoint the crowd in Melbourne, so to speak. And there was a bit of disappointment for the crowd in Melbourne that we saw today. But Casper, before we jump to John, I just want to get your reaction. I mean, we sort of stuck with Whittaker winning this one. On paper, it looked like Brunson was going to do it, but there was that X factor that we've seen Robert do time and time again against Brad Tavares, Uriah Hall. What was your reaction like when you saw him pull this one through?
Sorry, John, I'm going first this time. Well, as most people would know that in the media, when you're sitting press row, really anywhere, it's considered unprofessional to, clap or cheer or make any facial expressions or do anything. And it was very hard. I mean, being completely unbiased and trying to be unprofessional, it's still a feel-good moment, especially the way the card played out. There was a lot of downers for a lot of the Aussies. And, it wasn't exactly the case that all the fights were excellent. So when you have a great fight like this, it was back and forth. There were some wild moments. It was a very wild fight. And then Robert Whittaker pulls off a fight that, a lot of people didn't expect him to do, myself included. Not to say that I picked against him, but I definitely saw Derek Brunson, with a strategy to win, and it seemed to me like he sort of abandoned that a little bit, maybe thought that he had Robert Whittaker hurt. A lot of the technique, I think just in general, the game plan kind of went out the window, and he spoke about it before where he felt pressure to perform, and it's just, I think it's something that he's going to have a really big lesson from, and sort of going further, it's probably going to improve him. He's probably going to be a little bit more impervious to sort of the crowd and the pressure. It's the guy's first main event, but I will say, we all sort of were in despair when Luke Rockhold and Jacare fell out. But did it kind of win? Was this kind of a gamble that paid off? I mean, you have a guy in Robert Whittaker who is now knocking on the door of a title shot and really needs that star power, and he's the lasting impression that everybody gets from UFC Melbourne. I think it kind of worked.
I know you're dying to say something, John, but I wanted to quickly go back to what Casper said. I mean, he was out here before doing the post-fight press conference, quite emotional, and mentioned that the fact that he had so many first-round finishes sort of played into the strategy, that he had no strategy in this fight, really. He kind of ran out there and he sort of went a bit loco, a bit crazy, just tried to finish it in the first round. He said it sort of played a factor in this fight. What was your thoughts on this, I suppose, strategy, no strategy that we saw from Brunson in the fight?
Yeah, it was a little bit odd, that he said that, and I kind of, to me, I think I think there probably was at least a little bit of a game plan. He did kind of make it seem like he kind of went into it nothing, but you could see right away, once he had Whittaker, I thought Whittaker was hurt as well. If Whittaker's saying he wasn't, and he's surprised that Derek thought he was, I was a few feet outside as well, and I thought he was hurt too. But yeah, I think Brunson cost himself. He wasn't picking his shots. I think if he would have just slowed down a little bit, been a little bit patient. He was so off balance and charging forward. He was almost falling into takedown attempts because he was being so aggressive, and I think that really cost him, to be honest with you. So listen, I thought it was an impressive win from Whittaker, no doubt. To your point about it kind of being a risk that paid off, it is great. It's always the last fight and how people feel when they walk out the door. It's kind of their lasting memories of a card. It's great that Whittaker is kind of right below that top tier. A fight with a Gegard Mousasi, I think, would be a fantastic fight if that could be lined up. But yeah, it worked out great. I think Brunson will definitely take some lessons. Tough to see him up at the dais here and talking to us. Tears kind of streaming down his cheek behind the glasses, taking it really, really hard. And I think those are lessons that stick with you for sure.
It's interesting that you mentioned Mousasi, because I just wanted to go around the table quickly and get you guys' thoughts. Mousasi would be a great matchup. Obviously, Anderson Silva ranked above him. Chris Weidman's coming off the loss. Are we all set on this Gegard Mousasi fight? Because I'd like to see it happen. Is that the fight that you guys want to see next?
I just think that's the one that has the biggest upside. Yes, Anderson Silva, incredible name. One of the greatest fighters of all time, if not the number one of all time. But kind of on the downside right now. Vitor Belfort is somebody that's name is still in there, but we've seen what kind of performances he's had as of late. So for me, yeah, I think that's the one I'd like to see, because that's the one where you've got two guys on the way up. One, obviously Gegard's accomplished a little bit more over the course of his career, but he seems to be really starting to catch fire in the UFC's middleweight division. So I think that, to me, is the one that has the biggest upside, especially while you still have that little glut of, top level contenders right at the top.
And I think also, if you look at the other options, there aren't really too many. You could give him Jacare, you could give him Luke Rockhold, but I think that's a fantastic fight that people still want to see. There's a lot of value in that. So why break up that fight? Why shuffle the deck? If you do give him Luke Rockhold, let's say, which would be a great fight, what do you do? Mousasi versus Jacare? I don't want to see that rematch, not just yet at least. And at least with Mousasi, if you look at their career trajectory, series. They're both on really good streaks. Musasi's hotter than ever. I mean, people are talking about him potentially fighting Anthony Rumble Johnson. That's how much belief they have in this guy. So his stock's at an all-time high. For Robert Whittaker can go in there, maybe he wins, maybe he loses, but if he can go in there and beat Musasi, I think it's hard to deny that guy the next title shot. And hopefully the division will sort of sort itself out, by then.
It's exciting. It's exciting, and we talked about it a little bit earlier this week. But the thing, and just to reiterate it, but the fact that he's only 25 years old, I feel like the guy's been around already, Whittaker, for so long that he should be past that. So I mean, he's still like developing and kind of a young gun, so to speak. He's not a guy that's 28, 30 years old. I mean, there's so much upside ahead of him, man. It's very exciting.
Well, the crazy thing is he could have lost tonight. We were saying this earlier. His career would be nowhere near. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be over, but he could have lost tonight and had 10 years theoretically to regroup. In 10 years, he's going to be 35. A lot of guys are not necessarily hitting their prime, but I mean, you see a lot of guys like we were talking about before with Fabrizio Verdum. Even Jacare, he's an older guy and he's knocking on the door of a title shot. So yeah, you're right. It is crazy how young he is.
The only thing about Robin, I mean, we speak to him all the time. He's a great guy, a fantastic competitor, but I'd like to see him be a little bit more vocal about who he wants next. I mean, we see these opportunities where you get the mic in the middle of the octagon after a big victory like that. I mean, does it serve a purpose, John, for him to be a little bit more vocal, get the more favorable matchups? I mean, have a look at this. A year ago, he was supposed to be fighting Michael Bisping, UFC 193. Now, if he would have beat Bisping then, and a lot of people believed he would have had a really quick pathway to the title. He wouldn't be here right now. He wouldn't be fighting Derek Brunson. Do you think that's something that's missing out of this game is going to slow this path a little bit down for him?
Well, you hate to say it's missing out of his game. I mean, I do feel like he's talking more than he ever has before. I interviewed him pre-fight and then see him here post-fight as well. I do think he's getting a little bit more comfortable in front of the microphone, a little bit comfortable in front of the cameras and talking. I mean, that is a part of the game. But the other thing, too, is when it's not real and it's fake and it's not there, you know what I mean? I think people sense that, and then it kind of puts people off. So I think, the biggest thing is it's not like you can just create a persona. I mean, we've seen mixed martial arts, the UFC is sporting entertainment. It's not just wins and losses. You got to give people a reason to care as well. It's definitely an entertainment part of it, but it can't be fake either. It's just got to be who you are, kind of cranked up a little bit. And I feel like Robert is slowly kind of making himself into that role.
I'm with Dennis on that one in the sense that I do feel like he should talk a little bit more. I mean, we asked him at the scrum, what do you think about Bisping? What do you think about Romero? And he didn't really comment on it, even though
he said that why does my opinion matter?
It does
when
matter.
We asked him. And I mean, to a degree, it does.
I will say, though, he does have this sort of innocent charisma about him, and maybe it's just a Kiwi thing. Like Dan Hooker, he's such a lovable guy, even though things didn't go well for him. Mark Hunt's not really the biggest trash talker per se, but there's just something captivating about him. He's a very likable guy, and Rob's kind of got that as well. It's a very sort of genuine factor, and sort of it transcends cultures as well. You don't have to be just an Aussie or a Kiwi to like that. A lot of the the Americans, they like that as well. I just think that as far as headlines and media and things like that, it's going to hurt him a little bit. But I mean, we've seen guys like, say, Frankie Edgar and other guys, and be denied these title shots.
Now, John, before we move on to the other fights on the card, I just want to quickly ask your opinion. I mean, we heard Casper talk about it before, how you wanted to know if Rob wanted to fight locally or internationally. Internationally, more people see you on a bigger card. Locally, he may be headlining in the next card, and it may be a free card. Free things are always fun. What do you think should be the next logical step for Rob in terms of getting that fan base? Because even though he's an amazing fighter, let's be honest, he's still quite unknown to the majority of the MMA public overseas.
I think it's an interesting question because, I thought for a while he needed to be coming to Las Vegas more often, the United States more often, get some of the bigger fights. But as you said, down here he can headline a card. And he mentioned to me earlier this week too. He's, listen, it's a tough flight. I'm facing a 16-hour flight home tomorrow. You know what I mean? All I got to do is go sit at a computer all week. To have to fly 16 hours and get used to it. And it's worse going east than it is west. I think it maybe does make sense to fight over here a little bit more. He mentioned he would love to fight in Asia. Now the UFC's kind of not making huge strides in Asia right now, probably only one or two. But you take one or two Asian events, take one or two Australian/New Zealand events. I honestly think staying over here wouldn't be a terrible thing for him because he could get a few headliners in and maybe get some animals. Because again, I don't think there's a huge rush right now. If he's on a pay-per-view main card as like the fourth fight or maybe in the third fight, it's a good spot. But right now there's still a couple of fights that need to be sorted out ahead of him. So I guess depending on the matchup, if it's going to be him and Mousasi, a main card, also where Mousasi maybe has to travel from Europe down here to Australia or to New Zealand or something like that would be pretty cool. So, I think on the surface, it's like, man, you got to get to the United States. You got to be in the big fights. That's where the big cards are. But, he's tasted that. And I think he said, yeah, that makes some sense. But I kind of like fighting in this area too. And when you think about it, I think it makes some sense for him.
Now, Casper, speaking of people fighting overseas, Jake Matthews, he last fought there, didn't go his way against Kevin Lee. Again tonight, he lost against Andrew Holdsbrook. What was your analysis on his performance and how he did tonight in UFC Melbourne?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the first time he's lost 2 in a row, and he's sort of in that territory where he came out the gate really hard, was undefeated. He lost to James Vick, and sort of people thought, well, he got caught, it can happen, bounced back, and then there was Kevin Lee, and now he's lost 2 in a row. I think that in this fight, he just made some crucial errors. In the first round, it seemed to me almost like Nick Diaz and Carlos Condit, where he was very content with how the fight was going because he felt he could bounce back. There was not really any moments in this fight where he was badly hurt or anything like that. I think the clock it wasn't really effective time management. I think by the time the third round came around, he was sort of in a situation where we had to finish. He was sort of, there were moments where he was on top and he wasn't really doing a whole lot of it. Holbrook was so busy, he was constantly throwing up submissions that Jake was kind of in defense mode. He wasn't really getting in his own offense. So unfortunately, he sort of dropped the ball tonight.
John, I'm curious because there's some criticism online. Some people are saying maybe he needs to go travel a little bit, check out some camps, work with other people. Other people are saying, hey, look, this guy's 22 years old. He's young in his career and he's fighting some tough, wily dudes with some experience in the octagon, experience in fighting. What do you think happens next? And do you agree with those sentiments? Do you think he should go around and maybe play around a little bit, experiment a little bit, or do you think it's just a young stage in his career that he's going to learn from?
When you're young and single, you're supposed to experiment a little bit, right? No, listen. I think there's validity to both sentiments. To be honest with you, here's a guy that's young, but he's been heaps of expectations on him, right? And facing top level guys. Holbrook didn't come in with a lot of respect, but people that know him, know the game they brought, and I think he showed it in there what he's capable of. But I do, it does concern me every time I talk to him, and I respect him. For saying, no, I want to be the 100% all Australian guy. I want to be that guy. I think that's cool, but maybe when you're 25, 26, go out there and get what you can right now. If you don't want to travel forever and move away from Australia or whatever, totally understandable. But, I would like to see him maybe, take advantage of the opportunities that are out there to him. He's a top-level prospect. There's no doubt about it. And the UFC, I think, would certainly like to see him succeed, and I think they could probably help open some doors for him. So I would like to see him train a little bit. It always concerns me when it seems like he's shutting himself down to just remaining here. I think that there could be some benefit to going abroad and training a little bit, getting some different looks. But as Casper said, I think ultimately what it boiled down to tonight was just sense of urgency and positional awareness at times that just didn't seem to be there. The moments that he needed to make crucial changes and crucial decisions that he did. And I still think he's a top-level talent. I saw, monitoring Twitter a little bit while the fights are going on and typing out the play-by-play. It seemed like, some people were jumping ship and saying, maybe it's time to write this kid off. He's not as good as we thought he was. I don't agree with that. I still see a lot of potential in there, but I would like to see him, take the opportunity to maybe refine it in some different places.
See, I find that crazy. 22 years old. He needs time just to learn from his experiences and learn from his fights. I feel like every time he makes a mistake, he learns something from it. James Vick, for example, was a mistake that he learned something from. Kevin Lee, I'm not sure. We'll see if he's learned something from. Maybe the big lesson there was getting in there with some tough wrestlers overseas, doing some training and getting across it. Maybe that was the issue tonight, Casper. When you see people on Twitter saying that this 22-year-old kid is done and he has no future in the sport, how do you react to that?
He's 22. Like you said, if he fights another 18 years, he's going to be 40 years old. Now, he may not want to fight till he's 40, and we don't know what's going to happen there, but I think it's hard to really put a ceiling on a guy who's really still developing his skill base. Like you mentioned about traveling, he could go and spend the next year abroad going to a whole bunch of camps. We see someone like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is a champion, who seemingly is getting everything or was getting everything that she needed. She's at the pinnacle of her division, and she still went over to ATT. He could go and do a Jake Matthews tour, go to ATT, go to Jackson Winklejohns, go to MMA Lab. There's a whole bunch of great camps out there, and I think you maybe he even spoke about this. That sometimes it's hard to sort of get the Aussie guys to train together and find sparring partners. So you would think, why not go to a gym where you've got not so much killers, but guys that are very high level who are going to show you new things, and you'll sort of figure out ways to get out of certain positions that guys here maybe they can't put it on you, or maybe they can. can, but like he trains with Dan Kelly so often, and even I think Dan or Jake said they often have stalemates. So I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't put a ceiling on Jake yet. I think he has many, many years before he even peaks, let alone his career would be over.
That's right. For people that don't know, he did really well in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition here in Australia, came first. So, I mean, he is at the peak of a lot of different skill sets here in Australia, but would it be the same in America and some other ones? You know, it's always good to test yourself. Let's talk about possibly one of my favorite moments from the night, the Dan Kelly victory over Chris Camozzi. Now, we saw that Chris wanted a nice holiday to Australia, wanted to have a bit of fun, and he told us he was going to take a trip to Hamilton Island after this fight. Possibly not as much fun now after the fight happened. John, did you pick Dan Kelly to do what he did tonight against Chris Camozzi and, I mean, just blow everybody's mind in another performance where he came from behind in a fight that a lot of people thought he was going to lose?
No, I definitely didn't. You know, I definitely didn't. But then again, I don't know how many times I picked against Dan Kelly. The guy just keeps shocking and surprising. But yeah, it was interesting. You know, Camozzi is certainly a guy that we've seen plenty over the years. We know what to expect when he comes in. But I was really surprised, and I even actually tweeted something during the fight, which I don't usually like to comment on people's game plans or whatever. But I just wondered, like, every time he left the pocket, his hands were down, and he was getting caught on the way out, and it wasn't changing anything. I didn't understand why he was doing that. It looked like he was, you know, when he was shaking, he'd get touched up and then shake it off. You know, that was nothing. Okay, maybe it's nothing, but guess what? Those points are adding up, man. You know, you're getting hit. You need to fix that. And I just thought there was that he was taking things a little bit too lightly as things went on. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, the only reason Kelly won is because Camozzi took it lightly, but I was kind of surprised at how that was unfolding. And then, you know, Kelly, I didn't even know the story about his son, to be honest with you, until this week. And you know, as a father myself, I'm not gonna lie. After the fight was over, I actually texted my wife and kid to tell them I love them, and I was tearing up a little bit as I was sitting on press row, just because to think about what his family's going through, and this being his son's birthday, you know, when he goes through a fight where he says he wasn't hurt, but damn it to me, man, blood's pouring everywhere. That looks like a gut check type of moment, you know what I mean? And to have to dig deep on a day like this, and man, dude, just inspirational stuff. And man, it's awesome. You know, as I asked him at the post-fight press conference, you know, what's the ceiling? It does seem like everybody's kind of waiting for the bubble to burst. You know, do you just go, well, you know, I'm turning 40 and I had a great run. This has been awesome, but this is about where I'm at my limit. And, you know, it seems like he thinks there's way more to go. So it's incredible. That guy just keeps silencing his critics.
What do you think, Casper? I mean, we spoke about what could be next for him. There's a plethora of fun opponents for him to fight, tough opponents, but still bigger name opponents. You had guys like Taylor Slatus in the mix. You had other guys in the mix. If you had to sort of choose or pinpoint someone that you think would make sense for him next, is there a name that sort of stands out in your mind?
Who you ran a few at during the press conference? What were some of the guys that you mentioned? I haven't had a chance to look at the rankings. I know he said Krzysztof Jotko, and he just beat Talis Laitis, so that could be a good one. Who else did you say? Some of the guys in the rankings?
You mentioned Laitis himself.
You meant I think Laitis could be a fun fight.
Coming off a loss, but I think stylistically they would match up pretty well together.
I think, like, we saw this with Anthony Perosh. Unfortunately, he's retired, but they sort of bumped him up, you know, very sort of slowly, and you know, fans really enjoyed his fights. And I think you could do the same thing with Dan Kelly, and just, you know, I don't think at this point people are looking at him as a title contender, and who knows if he'll ever reach that point. But I think because of that, you sort of, you know, give him these really slow bumps and build him slowly. There's really no rush. Even though he's an older guy, you don't need to give him this, you know, massive jump into the shark tank. So I think him and Talis Laitis could be a fun fight.
Yeah, Laitis. I mean, Hall was in there, a couple of other names, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. And I mean, we're always talking about this, how people keep picking against him, but I mean, this next fight will really should be a testament as to what's going to happen in his future. I mean, he is turning 40, but if he has a spectacular performance against the Holloway ladies, you'd think, oh my God, here we go. Australia's got another big star in their hands.
I just think, like, and again, I mean, not to doubt him because he keeps proving us wrong, but I would just think, like, putting him up against a young, dynamic striker would be a little concerning, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that's why I kind of like the Laitis matchup. Like, you know, that's a guy that's not going to come in and just blow you away on the feet, but he'll probably get into some interesting grappling exchanges. You know, Laitis doesn't have, like, you know, big blast double leg takedowns. He gets into the clinch with you, which was, I'm sure Mr. Kelly would be more than happy to have somebody stand in the clinch with him and throw some of his judo skills. So even though Laitis is coming off of a loss, I do kind of like stylistically the matchup. And again, I don't think Kelly's afraid to face any man, but you know, I don't know that I'd want to throw him in there against, like I said, a young dynamic striker.
A four-time Olympian. Now look at this career in the UFC. I mean, this is a movie that's happening in front of our eyes. Let's talk about another movie that's going to be made one day, the Conor McGregor movie. News came out recently how the 145 interim title was going to be on the line now. UFC UFC 206 in the main event, Casper. When you saw the news, first of all, what did you think of UFC's decision to make this move?
Which one specifically? The interim title or Conor
Putting
McGregor?
up the interim title and stripping McGregor of his title.
Well, I mean, as far as McGregor being stripped, I like that. Look, nothing against McGregor, nothing against his accomplishments. It is an amazing feat what he's been able to do. But the featherweight division has been neglected for too long. And we've seen over the last few weeks since UFC 205, the main fights that people are calling for are in the lightweight division. Whether it's Khabib, whether it's Tony Ferguson, people are talking about Nate Diaz. Of course, you still have people talking about Jose Aldo rematch, but I think, the big ones are at lightweight. And so if you're going to do lightweight fights, just give up the featherweight title. I mean, people are talking about, welterweight and Tyron Woodley, so it just doesn't seem like he's going to go back to featherweight. So I'm totally fine with him being stripped of the title or relinquishing it. As far as putting the interim belt on Pettis and Holloway, I think it spices up UFC 206. I don't really think that card could be, you can't really do much to save it. We spoke a while ago at how we thought GSP was going to be main eventing that. I wonder if the UFC wishes now that they just had GSP on the card. They wouldn't have had this predicament, but I guess it really kind of solidifies that the guy will be fighting Aldo next, which, to be honest, the winner was going to fight Aldo anyway. So I don't know if they really need a shiny belt there, to be honest.
I'm curious, John, because, the other option could have been possibly turning it into a fight night card. What do you think about the way this thing went down?
I was just puzzled with the whole handling of it. Like Casper said, I'm not really that opposed to the fact that Conor doesn't have the featherweight belt anymore. I remember leading up to that, I was saying, listen, I'm cool with this going for history. Like, this is pretty awesome stuff. But, on November 13th, I want to know what the hell is happening with the featherweight belt. So I'm okay, but just the way it was kind of unceremoniously done, like on a holiday weekend in the States and kind of a lower tier card, and we make this announcement during the middle, like we don't actually hear from Conor. I know that there's probably a reason we didn't hear from Conor. He might not be necessarily on board with this, but it just seems like the way it was just kind of unceremoniously handled, it's a little like, and I asked for comment from the UFC tonight. I was like, we didn't have a formal press conference, so I thought I might be able to nail down Joe Carr a little bit and see if I could get, explain the mindset. What was the thought process? Didn't get that. So I thought the handling was weird. And as you said, Casper, too, the other thing is, like, if the whole move was necessitated as an approach to save UFC 206, it didn't happen. You know what I mean? God bless. Just make it a main event. If that has to be the main event, like you said, turn it into a fight night, or just understand it's not going to do that well on TV or what. Does an interim title really make it any more exciting? Like, I wasn't gonna buy it, but now there's an interim title on the line. Oh, let me get my wallet out right now. I just don't get the process, to be honest with you. I'm okay, I think, with the end result, but the handling of it all just feels a little sloppy.
It's interesting because a lot of people are joking about the fact there's an interim title, another interim title with Jose Aldo, who's now the champion. I was talking about the fact that I feel like McGregor can still come out there with that second belt because he never lost it. Talk about, I'm the real champion. I don't know if it really takes away anything from the division, but let's say he loses in a lightweight title match and he needs another big match. He can find himself right back in there in the featherweight division. But John, me and Casper have spoken about the fact that we like lightweight for McGregor, so many exciting fights. Is this the right belt to relinquish for McGregor?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. We've all seen the video and the photos, or we've been there in person, and like what he looks like at 145 and how he struggles. This is the right one. And there's more competitive matchups. There's more fun matchups. There is a point. The one thing that he always sold that I did think made a lot of sense was, McGregor would say, look, I haven't defended my featherweight belt, but is anybody calling for me to fight Aldo again? Like, I knocked him out in 13 seconds. And I'm like, well, there are some people that would like to see it, but you're kind of right. Like, I'd much rather see Khabib. I'd much rather see Tony Ferguson. There's better options at lightweight. Even it would be crazy if he wanted to go up at 170. It wouldn't be 3 belts simultaneously, but should he find a way to beat Tyron Woodley, it still would be a third title, which would be history again because nobody's ever done it. So yeah. This is definitely the right move all the way around. It is. It's the right move to make. It's just a weird one to make, the way it was done and the way it's handled. And as you said, if for other reason, if he does decide he wants to go back to featherweight, please. He's gonna be effing with those guys forever. Like, dude, Aldo, you're the champ. Like, I start you in 13 seconds. You had to get your daddy Dana to hand it to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, Holloway's talking about me now with the interim. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? So, Conor will have a field day with this if it does him any good to motivate things at the 145-pound division.
Before we wrap up, guys, I mean, we're here in Melbourne. The card was, I mean, a lot of people were down on it, but there were some fun fights, a few decisions, a few disappointing performances. Carl Noak retiring, which is an emotional thing for myself because I've been watching him for such a long time and he's such a great guy, everything that he's done in the sport. Tyson Pedro coming out, I mean, he's got a crazy story, fighting 4 times only and 3 times in 2016, coming into the UFC and winning. I said that Dan Kelly was my favorite moment of the night. I'd like to go around and get your favorite moments and your moment of the night, Casper. What would that be?
I really like Alex Volkanovski. Like you mentioned here, he spoke at the media scrum about how he was living with his mum to save money, and his family have invested so much in him. And it kind of reminded us of all of the Conor McGregor situation, where he's talking about his girlfriend Dee and all that she did to sort of motivate him and support him. And I think in a lot of ways that is the life of a fighter until they make it. And just because you're in the UFC doesn't even necessarily mean that you've made it. But there are a lot of guys struggling and sort of looking for that way to pay off their family back. And who knows where his career will take him. I'm personally excited, especially after what he did tonight, but I think in a lot of ways it's sort of, I guess, vindication for his family, and sometimes that's enough for them to be proud to say that, hey, we put all these sacrifices away, and now here in the UFC. Also, I've got to say, Tyson Pedro, I mean, I've said this a million times, 3 of the light heavyweights in the division in the top 10, there's a good chance they're going to be retiring soon. We need new blood.
Sure.
And I like the way Tyson Pedro came in. And just like Robert Whittaker and Mark Hunt, he's got that funky, innocent charisma about him. People really like him. Coming out to, I'm feeling sexual, we should be sexual. I love it.
Singing it as he's there, dancing, having a little groove. I was
A little hat as well.
This dude is not nervous at all. Either that or he is one hell of an actor.
And the whole story about how he wanted to fight Daniel Cormier when John Jones pulled out, I believe a few times. I like it already.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be a personality. Morgan, we are on the submission radio stage. I mean, last time UFC 205 was the submission radio lounge at Madison Square Garden, but I think with you here and doing the full show, this might even be a more special moment. But what
they set this up for you is amazing.
Wrong logos, but nevertheless.
There was another stage set up for the post-up presser. We said that's not good enough. Put another one up and do it now.
Crew was hard at work getting it done. I mean, obviously they understood who you guys were, and they were like, well, yes, sir, please be patient. We'll get this done.
They said we're MMA Junkie. We need it right now.
That's right. We said you don't need to see your family on Sunday. Get to work, monkey. But listen, I want to get your moment of the night. I mean, Casper rattled off a few. I have the Dan Kelly one. So many great moments. What stands out to you as the big moment tonight?
Well, it's funny because, if you look at just the results of this card on paper and you go decision, oh my God, it must have been horrible. No, it was a fun fight night. There were a lot of good fights from start to finish. But you guys know what my main event was going in. Jason Knight, Dan Hooker. That was my personal headliner, and I thought they lived up to it. I mean, 2 young talents, two prospects that I think both have some real upsides and had a few words for each other along the way. And I thought the fight lived up to it. It was every bit as fun as I thought it was going to be. Hard fought to the end. I mean, Jason Knight could barely stand at the end of that fight because he had been pushed to the limit. You guys didn't even get to talk to him backstage because I understand he was basically puking his guts out and needed to be taken to the hospital to make sure he was okay. So, I mean, that's being pushed to the limit. And I'm a big fan of both those guys. I like their styles. I like their attitudes. And to me, that fight lived up to the excitement that I had for it going in. That was interesting. Kind of a bizarre moment of the night. How about Danielle Taylor and Salehi Ham in the 3rd round where the eye poke gets missed? And don't say anything bad about Danielle Taylor. You go until the ref tells you to stop. The ref missed the eye poke. There's no question about it. Replay show that he missed it. But, Salehi Ham is trying to call timeout. You don't get timeouts in MMA. You've got to defend yourself at all times. But, it's kind of wild to see a person standing there defenseless with their hand on their eye and somebody else just walk up and clock them. So that was a bizarre moment, to say the least. Lausa in the first fight of the night, I thought the very first fight of the night set the tone. Quick jab, straights, just... Oh, man, the boxing was on point. I thought this thing got started great. 3 decisions on the Fight Pass prelims, and all 3 of them were like fight of the night, competitors going in. I was like, dude, what kind of night is this going to be? So, yeah, man, this was one of those fight cards that definitely flew under the radar. Didn't necessarily have the spectacular finishes from start to finish, but some fights you look back on and be like, damn, that was a lot of fun.
Well, we've got a crowd assembling here on the Submission Radio stage. We might be doing some karaoke, maybe.
Please.
Everybody calm down.
We'll be here all night.
No, it's not Red Panty Night. Put that away before they start going crazy and rip us off the stage, because we will be doing a duet, a triplet. We'll be doing a whole thing. We've been practicing all week, some choreography. I want to thank you, John, for jumping on the show. Thank you, everybody, for following our coverage on Submission Radio with UFC Melbourne. It's been a pleasure. Another event here in Australia, and a shocking result for the main event. A great time had. I mean, what else could you ask for? We'll catch you guys next time.